Welcome back.
Welcome back.
We've been away, but you're back.
Oh, you know what's funny is I realized this editing the video is every time we have you do the intro, I've gone, you do the intro, and then we go like directly into it. So the camera's on me waiting for you, and then you go, welcome back. So it's like, it doesn't even start on the person talking.
When you say lights, camera, action, I'm on.
Yeah,
I'm a
that's
different person at that point. You're back at the Port Sports Podcast. We took a week off, but
Yes.
that just makes us better, I think.
Yeah, we sharpened the blade in that
Maybe.
week.
I don't know. Well, I'll have to listen back to this episode and see if we did, in fact, sharpen the blade. But we really spent some time on the NFL draft today. We obviously had to hear about what you did in Montana.
Sure.
Your journey across Montana.
I did feel like an Oregon Trail settler at different points.
Wild outdoorsman, yes.
In a Toyota RAV4, putting thousands of miles on a Toyota RAV4.
That's like the dream for Toyota. They want people taking their I have a RAV4. It's not going across Montana. It's just going across Tacoma.
Yeah.
Probably not as exciting for them. They want you.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about that. We talk about the draft. There are some hot topics we need to get to. Dillon Brooks is hitting people in the balls left and right.
Like
What's up
Bobby
with that?
Hill.
Yeah, what's wrong with him? And we got a hockey team that's doing well in Seattle. A lot of Seattle stuff today.
Very Seattle heavy. Most of our listeners are in Seattle, so for them it's good. As we try to branch out and take over the country.
I think in the future we would I could definitely see us in the future splitting up 2 podcasts, same name. Of course,
Yes.
We're not that creative. One locally focused, one more nationally focused.
Sure.
Today we had a few national topics, but a lot of local. So if you are a Seattle-based person, this will be much more of interest to you. But,
Yes.
Either way.
As we try to slowly leech listeners away from sports radio in the area.
Yeah, of course.
Today's the day.
Maybe exactly.
Tell your friends. The leading draft analysts are on this episode.
That's a good call out. If you missed us at all last week while we were gone, then that just means you should go subscribe, review, rate our podcast.
Yes.
If you didn't miss us, you don't have to do those things, but we'd appreciate it.
I think
anyway.
you still do it. That's what I say.
Yeah, just go ahead and do it anyway. It helps a lot. That's the lifeblood of podcasts. Really.
Yes.
My name is Alex. I'm at AlexSSN.
I'm Casey McLean at the Casey McLean and thecaseyMcLean.com for all stand updates.
You have some shows coming up too.
Shows coming up. June 25th, Tacoma Comedy Club is the one we talk about the most. That date remains. Check the website for the rest of them. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week. Or I guess fucking listen to this episode. What am I doing? What am I doing? Okay. We're back.
We're back. We took a week off.
Yes. Without any announcement, nobody cared. Nobody messaged me.
Yeah. It's always sad when no one cares where you went.
I did.
It's reality, though.
I did play golf in Montana with a guy that I'm friends with, but I think is also to some degree a fan of yours. Do you remember Douglas Scott?
Oh yeah, the outdoorsy guy.
Yeah, hiker. He's a hiker. Now he used to be Exotic Hikes. Now he is
his name changes a lot.
The guy with the bison tattoo is his. He lives in Montana now. He used to do guided hikes of the Olympic National Forest. Now he's doing like Yellowstone, a little more prestigious.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah,
he's a better golfer than he looks like if you watch his swing. Every time he would hit a ball straight, I was like blown away.
Yeah.
Not that I have like the prettiest swing in the world, but
does he have a little bit of the Charles Barkley going on?
There's a little bit of Barkley. There's a little Barkley going on. So I was in Montana. I was entertaining the people of Montana. And
how'd that go for you?
It was all right. What's interesting about the places that I go in Montana, because you have to go to population centers to be able to do comedy in an underpopulated state like that.
Yeah.
So the whole of Montana is very conservative, but I literally I went to I did a show in first night was in Billings. So this is another thing. I competed in 3 of the cities I was in. Matt Bronger was performing in that city that night, a much more famous comedian than me.
Okay.
In 2 of the cities, Trevor Noah was performing in the same city that
He went to
night.
Montana. That's impressive.
Yes, apparently they kept telling me it was like it had been rescheduled like a bunch of times. I want to record this up here too just to see. Sorry. I'm ruining this for everybody.
So you had some stiff competition.
Yeah, and then one of the cities I also had Fortune Feimster, who in a normal city, if we go to Seattle, I don't think I'm competing for the same audience as Fortune Feimster, but when it's like it's the only thing going on in town. It doesn't really matter if it's a lesbian comic. It's the only comedy. So all comedy
and
fans,
she's popular. She's been in movies.
And she's very good. I'm not saying she's not very good, but she is certainly more famous than I am. And she crushed me in the competition.
So how are your crowds?
So first night there were 6 paid audience members, 3 comps in a like the event space of a water park, which I did like. I liked the space. And actually, all those people, I think that crowd was my favorite crowd. Like, there weren't a lot of them, but the people were all there to laugh, all good sports.
Yeah.
There was a very stoned kid in the audience. I made fun of him. The comic before me, a really funny comic named Charles Hall from Spokane.
Yeah.
He opened for me the first 2 nights. He's a buddy of mine. And so he said something about Shaq. He's got a line about Shaq in a joke, and the kid did not know who Shaq was, this stoned kid. At first, he claims to know later, but he didn't know at the time.
I could see that happen.
Yeah.
If you're high. Yeah.
Yeah. And there were like these kids that I'm like, they go to private school, they go to college. College is not the demographic of comedy fans that I typically get along with, but I think it's like a Christian school. So it was really like, but the 6 old people, I did say in the room, I go, this room is on average almost exactly my age, with nobody being even close to my age, because it was like 21-year-old, 19-year-old, 19-year-old, and then like 65-year-old, 59-year-old. Like
you're the perfect median.
Yes, I'm perfectly placed age-wise to disappoint everybody in the crowd.
Yeah, that's tough. I do feel like most comedy audiences are probably more our age demo. Like,
yes.
The 35 to 45 type crowd. So to have a wide spread of like very young and very old, that's got to be tough.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I used to do, I have a joke, I haven't done it in a while, but I make a hip hop reference. And it's, if the crowd's young enough, the actual joke is most F's black on both sides. But if I'm going to make a hip hop reference for old people, hip hop hasn't been popular for long enough for some of them to know the name of an album. So I just have to say, like, Tupac, All Eyes on Me, hoping that reference lands with those old. If I notice the crowd's older, and then if they're younger, like Mos Def, they're like, what? Mos Def, the actor? Who the fuck are you talking about?
Mos Def's a tough one. Yeah, he's not. I would not consider him the mainest of the mainstreams.
Right. Well, and by his own design, he's like a tortured artist.
Yeah.
I watched a documentary on him recently. He's nutty, but he's like. Black on Both Sides is my favorite hip-hop album in the history of hip-hop. And then he's like made probably his next best album. He intentionally will not sell to a streaming service.
Interesting.
You can only really buy it like used, and it's like $100 to buy it used.
Okay. So it's like it's very limited.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then the second night I was in Bozeman, and they've been doing so last time I was in Bozeman, I went to a comedy club there. And at the risk of, because I might work there again in the future, I'll limit the shit I talk about that experience, because there was a lot of stuff that went wrong, much of it inflicted by the comedy club. Actually, I would say 0 inflicted by me, and I'm willing to give myself blame a lot of the time. I fuck up a lot of the time. So we did an independent venue, a record store, and Matt Bronger was there at that comedy club that night instead of, by the way, they probably would have bumped me because they should have Matt Bronger be there.
Yeah.
But I was competing with him there. So the people, this is a Trevor Noah, Matt Bronger night. And it's one of those, like, if you're not at one of those shows, the people who are going to come to my show instead are like, they might not be mainstream comedy audience members.
I can't imagine. I've been to Bozeman a few times, and it's not big enough to support 3 different comedy shows,
right,
and have the what you say is the third best one.
Well,
get anybody.
I'm not saying best quality necessarily. I'm just saying it's the third most popular by a long shot.
Being the bronze medalist in a town like Bozeman,
yes,
not great.
Yes. So that crowd, literally at one point I go, is anybody here not in college? And there were like 3 people, and I think 2 of them were professors at the college, and then one was like this guy that does construction that somehow he's like a Latino guy that moved from LA to Bozeman. And I asked him, I was like, did you not come across another town on your way to Bozeman that you were like, oh, I could stop here instead, you know? Like, what the fuck?
He just kept going, and then he's like, I can't go to Canada, so I guess we're stopping here.
Yeah, and so there's a thing about small crowds like this, which is I get paid the same. I mean, I have a minimum guarantee, and the minimum guarantee was enough to get me out there, right? And it's a buddy of mine, Alex Kaufman, that runs these shows, Bone Dry Comedy. Check him out if you're out there. Great shows they put on. But the less audience members there are, for me, it means selling less merch and shit like that. First 2 shows, I was thinking about it in terms of average money per patron.
Yeah.
First night, 6 paid people, I sold $60 in merch. Second night, like 18 paid people, I sold $60 in merch. But still, $3 per person or whatever is like, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
If I'm in a room that's 200, which I'm not selling myself, but if it's like if I'm featuring for someone and I'm selling $600 in merch a show, that's pretty goddamn good.
Yeah.
The next night I did what was the venue the next night? Oh, it was Missoula. It was at a VFW, which sounds like it would be a terrible comedy show.
So what's a VFW?
VFW is a Veterans of Foreign Wars. It's kind of like an Elks Club, Eagles Club type situation. And you go in and like this, obviously they've opened the back room of this up for comedy and it's available to the public. I don't know what a VFW like contemporarily means. That's what it stands for though.
How many people are at Missoula is probably the biggest of, if Billings might be bigger.
Billings is bigger, but Billings doesn't have a big college, I don't think.
Missoula's got the biggest college.
I think that's right. And then Bozeman also has a big
Montana
college.
State,
It's kind of weird. So this is my limited understanding of Montana. Billings is the biggest, but has the worst economy. Bozeman is the smallest of the 3 I've mentioned, but it's like turning into Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where like you can't find a house there for under $1 million.
And it's got Montana State, and then Missoula's got the University of Montana. So.
Yes. And then you go to university, or you go to Missoula, and so I go to Missoula, it's in this VFW. This is actually the most attended show. There was probably 35, 40 people there.
Yeah.
I sold $120 in merch. We're sticking to that $3 per patron thing. That's pretty damn good. The shows but it's funny because your view of Montana is they're going to be super conservative and like up for anything. And I'm going to these college towns, and I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm actually in Seattle. Actually, the Bozeman show in the record store was, I accused them of cosplaying liberalism. I'm like, you're like trying too hard to prove a point. Like, relax a little bit, okay? Like, these are all fucking jokes. I'm from Seattle. Like, they work there. They should work in fucking Bozeman, okay?
Yeah.
So anyway, it was like, whatever. Missoula's fun. We went out drinking, and there was a
Missoula
bar.
is very good for drinking. Yeah.
Well, we didn't even go. We were going to go to some. All the comics that came to the show, they all went to this bar, and they're like, "Yeah, there's live music," and I'm like, "You couldn't talk me out of a venue faster or of a bar faster."
You're not a live music fan?
It's always too loud, and especially like if I'm going to see the band. Like we went, my friend Chloe, who you know, we went and saw her and her band is called the Top Tankers, which is kind of cool. It's like all music teachers, and in the pandemic, they started playing music in each other's bathrooms. They'd all just like pile 5 people and their instruments, including like a drum kit, a cello, like huge instruments into the bathrooms, film it, play music.
Exactly what you're supposed to do during the pandemic. Yes. Just crowd a bunch of people into a tight space.
Maybe they were doing it before the pandemic and but anyways, so like that's fine because I like the music. They play like 90s mashups and cover songs and like a few originals by Chloe, our friend, but not like I go to see them. But when you're going like, here's some comics I don't know very well, let's go like talk some shit, have a couple drinks, it's much harder to do when the volume is super loud.
Yeah.
So we go to the AC Hotel, which is very nice in Bozeman. Can't believe the bar was open. It's so nice that I'm like, you guys shouldn't be letting us in this late. Like, this is wild. And had like some whiskey, and then we actually did go to the place with the music, but after all the comics had left when it was quiet.
Yeah.
Anyways, Missoula's fine. The next day we walked around for a while because so the routing was, I show up in Bozeman Thursday. Immediately, like within 45 minutes of my flight, and it was only 45 minutes because Charles was driving from Spokane and he hadn't gotten there yet, but immediately drive to Billings, 3.5 hour drive.
Yeah.
Drive back that night,
To Bozeman?
To Bozeman. So we sleep in Bozeman. This is actually that day, that Friday, was the most relaxed day I've ever had on a Montana trip for comedy, because every other time I've gone to Montana, we're either there for the night and leaving, like doing comedy and leaving, not spending the night in Montana, or it's like I'm working my day job and we go fucking drive 1,200 miles. This one day we got to go play golf, relax, go to lunch, sleep in the same place I woke up. Pretty good. Then we drive to Helena, or we drive to Missoula, sleep there that night. I did feel a little bit bad because the booker and there was another guy that was with us.
Yeah.
They slept on someone's floor, and I slept in a hotel. But I was also like, I'm fucking 36 years old. Like, I need to be able to sleep if I'm going to be good at comedy tomorrow.
Yeah, you're past the point of cramming into a room and sleeping on a floor.
Yes, exactly. The last time I was there, the guy that books it is named Alex Kaufman. Very good. I can't get away from Alex's in my life. Also, by the way, I kept, when I'd FaceTime with my daughter, she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm with my friend Alex from the podcast. This kid knows what comedy and podcasts are. She's 3
smart.
years old. Yeah. So last time I was there, my buddy Alex he was in the process of buying a condo, but he was also in the process of escaping a psychopathic, violent roommate. So for 2 months, he lived in a townhouse there, and I slept in the townhouse with nobody else in it. They had not moved in at all, an air mattress, and he gives me a bag, and he's like, yeah, there's sheets for your bed in there. I open it up. It's a fitted sheet and another fitted sheet. And I have I'm not used to that.
So you wrapped yourself in one of the fitted sheets.
I literally, and I don't know how to work the thermostat. It's cold. It's uncomfortable. I have altitude sickness, which I don't do well at altitude, I've discovered. And so I learned the antidote for altitude sickness is to just drink more alcohol. That's what I've discovered.
I can see that working, yeah. So this sounds like a safe house that you're staying in.
Yeah. It's
based on his situation and the situation he put you in.
Right. So, but then I forced him to stay at the dangerous house.
He probably should have left you with a gun just in case, in case you need to defend yourself against his psychopathic roommate.
So anyways, I'm in that condo. Was so uncomfortable. I ended up, so I'm also working my day job from it, right? Well, one night we do a little bit of drinking, him and I, and he just comes back to the condo and he's downstairs slamming cabinets and shit like that. And I'm like, it's fucking 2 a.m, dude, but we're drinking, right? So the last night I was like, dude, I gotta get a hotel. I need to get a hotel. I paid for my own hotel. And then the person next to me was watching Law and Order SVU at full volume.
All night?
All night.
How come people that watch, I know people who do this, that watch shows like Law and Order and they never sleep normal hours. And when they should be sleeping, they're watching Law and Order.
Dude, I know.
What is Law and Order injected into their TV show that prevents you from sleeping?
I don't know. My wife, when we started dating, or when we started living together, she goes to sleep with the TV on. And I'm not one of those people. I'm a full silence, darkness. Maybe I'll have headphones on, but it's just to kind of distract my mind and block some shit out. I'll put an earbud in and have a podcast, a boring podcast going.
Yeah.
Sometimes a news podcast or something like that. And my wife, dude, she'll fall asleep to Law and Order SVU, Criminal Minds. And earlier in our relationship, it was every night you have to go to bed at the exact same time and watch TV together and all that stuff. And now when you have kids and multiple things going on in life, we're not always falling asleep at the exact same moment, right?
Sure.
But I used to go to bed and it would be I watched a horrific rape and murder and then go to sleep. Don't try not to have nightmares because
you need nighttime shows. A lot of times if we're watching TV, it's Friends or The Office or something that's really stupid.
Yeah.
Just very easy to watch. It's not going to interrupt your sleeping patterns in any way. You can fall asleep to it. But if you're watching something that you have to think about or that has some very serious themes to it, I don't know how you fall asleep.
Dude, I don't know. She falls asleep like a baby and I'm like, this is insane. I feel like you're in danger. I got to stay up and guard our house from rapists and murderers. So anyway, this time I sleep in a hotel. It's all I sleep pretty well. We're walking around Missoula, and Missoula is an interesting place because it feels like they're simultaneously in 2030 and 1930.
It's like an old west town that's been modernized because of the probably because of the college.
Yeah, well, it's like you'll see like literally a person in like a cowboy hat, dirty Wranglers that's like a legit cowboy, and then like a person who looks like they're from like a future space movie, like Xenon Girl of the 21st Century, that's like a college student, and you're like, holy shit, like these two people exist in this same town. I went to a bar, I posted a picture of it on Twitter, where it's a bar, it's also a breakfast place, that's what we were there for. Above the bar, there's a display with like 35 rifles in it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I believe it. When we used to, because we had family in Montana and North Dakota, we would go through Montana all the time when I was a kid.
Gotcha.
Every summer, pretty much. And there was this place that we stayed at just outside Missoula. And we'd stay there most trips. That was like our first stop. We'd like drive from here all the way to Missoula, and that's where we stayed the first night. And it was kind of like this on the outskirts of town on a little river, just old, kind of shitty place that had rooms that were basically like glorified cabins. And then it had like one like main house kind of thing, like where they had a restaurant and like where you would check in and everything. And the restaurant was like log cabin style. And on the ceiling and all the walls, they had all of these like, deer heads and stuff, like things that had been hunted and caught and killed and mounted on the wall.
Yes.
And I always remember what I would get to eat there. I would get, because they would have people go out to this river that was right nearby. They would catch trout. That was what was in the river. And like every day you could get like a whole trout as your meal. So as like awesome. A teenager, I'm eating like a whole trout that was caught that day.
What's it? That's place. Like a very different. Were you ever like a Boy Scout or anything? No. You don't strike. I'll say this. No. This is like maybe rude. You don't strike me as a guy who spent a lot of time outdoors in the wilderness as a kid. Maybe outdoors playing sports, but not.
Yeah. No, I'm not an outdoorsy type.
Gotcha.
That's not me. I prefer
respect
the city.
It. Yeah, I respect it. I do like. I mean, I grew up with it, but I'm like, I live in a city area now. I don't spend. I will say, my wife and I like took her camping for. We talked about this earlier, like in the podcast, for one of the first times in her life. Her family would talk about camping also and just be like, this is like an insane, distracting ad going on. I don't know why.
You're just getting it ready.
Yeah. But yeah, we should finish up the Montana talk, because the actual, every city I've faced some friction in the audience at some point. Not like angry, but it would be like there was, I will say this, in Montana, in Bozeman, the guy that did a guest spot, who's the guy that followed us to Missoula and Helena.
Yeah.
Really good, nice guy named Luke. I can't remember, Luke Conway maybe. He's a newer comic. He just did a guest spot on both nights and then helped with the setup and shit like that. He met like a woman on Tinder or something like that, and just had her invite 4 of her friends. So 5 of 18 audience members are her friends.
Okay? You got to do what you got to do to promote a show. But Are you guys using this kid
listen,
to go on the dating apps and find people to come to the show?
I mean, I can't speak for the booker. I don't know what's going on over there. I'll tell you, I'm not responsible for that. But
they didn't ask you to go on Tinder. They're like, actually,
you stay off. That'll hurt.
Not you.
Well, so this woman comes to the show and brings, I would say, 4 people who, after talking to them, I think 3 of the 4 use they, them pronouns, which is not my target demographic for sure. I no problem with that, whatever. I'm not. Yeah. I actually kind of get annoyed with this. Not even kind of. I think it's very discrediting for any conservative to use the phrase they, them as a slur. I think it discredits everything you might, like any serious discussion you might want to have. But there's these specific people, like 19-year-old people using they, them pronouns, are not going to come into a show and give me the benefit of the doubt. Like, that's my experience.
Also, when you're 19, it doesn't really matter what your intentions are or what pronouns you use. You're probably not going to get a lot of humor that's delivered to you from a comedian that's an adult.
36 with a kid. It's just, I'm not the right guy.
The problem with being 19, I mean, everyone can look back on when they were 19 and you think you're an adult.
Yes, of course.
And adults that are older than you are just wrong. It doesn't matter what it is. They're just wrong, So, of course, they're not going to give you benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. So anyway, so we go to Missoula's cool. We drive to Helena. And then Helena, we're at this place, the Lewis and Clark Brewing Company. They also had, I didn't say this on stage, I should have. They had like a blanket, like a woven blanket that's like something about Lewis and Clark. And obviously Lewis and Clark are attached to some kind of controversial stuff in the world. We're not supposed to like them or hate them. I don't remember what they did wrong, but it was bad, I'm sure. But they had in the blanket, it's a woven design that's like, these are the faces of Lewis and Clark, and then here's Sacagawea, and they just made her Michelle Obama, basically. Like, she looked exactly like Michelle Obama. I'm like, I don't think that's who, I don't know if that's
our
what
best
Sacagawea
guess.
is. Yeah.
How long ago was this made? Was it pre-internet?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Okay,
I bet, well, maybe.
No excuses.
I bet it's like,
pre-internet,
how long, I don't know how, let's find out how old this brewery is. It was a really cool space.
It sounds like the most legitimate of the spaces you performed at.
It definitely was. It was almost like a comedy club like setting. And when are you founded? It's gonna be too late.
Yeah, we can probably assume it's post-internet.
Oh, so it's like 2007. So yes, it's in the internet era. That makes me think they probably didn't do it specifically to look like Michelle Obama, but maybe they were very angry around the time this. So I go to Helena, and the last time I was in Helena, which was in 2000, it was October 2021. I was calling them racist, which is very fun to do in a rural town. It's just, no matter what, it's going to come up at some point. I'm going to call them racist. It's probably hacky, but it's fun, and it always creates like interesting discussion, usually anyway. The first time I did it, I was at this place called the Montana Club in this little area called the Rathskeller, which is like their basement bar. Really cool play, or really cool. The Rathskeller is really cool. The Montana Club, I think I've told you about probably on the podcast. In the tiles in front, they have swastikas.
Yes.
Because the place predates, and they're the good swastikas. We almost called an episode "Good Swastikas." We called it Beer Hall Swoosh, Beer Hall Whoosh, which I don't know if anyone got the reference. But it was about Budweiser swinging and missing, or not Budweiser, but the people who hate Budweiser swinging and missing. Anyway, that was the reference. But what I found out in Helena after I called them racist was that their mayor is black, and they were like, yeah, I go, you guys are racist. Our mayor, and they go, no, our mayor's black. And I was like, oh, okay. And they go, well, he did get arrested last week. And it made me laugh so fucking hard. I didn't get good video of it, and there was not enough people at the show to create it. So anyways, I'm on stage in Helena this time, and I bring this up. I go, last time I was here, I found out that your black mayor had been arrested. You can't even you become the mayor of this city, and you can't even escape police racism or something like that. And then, like, the crowd laughs, but there's, like, a dude in the audience who, before the show, had come up and asked the booker. He was like, I'm just kind of curious how this Seattle comedy is going to translate in Montana or whatever. And I'm like, listen, man, you've seen my comedy. You've talked to me a lot. I'm not, like, I'm not an obedient, liberal activist, obviously.
Just really quick, the guy that went up to the booker, is he somebody who works at the bar, or is he just some guy who's in attendance?
A patron who bought tickets.
So he's the type of dude that it's got to be about him no matter what.
Yes.
Because no normal attendee of a comedy show will go up to somebody who they know works there and it's like, I gotta share my opinion with you before this even begins. Like, that's insane. That's what an insane person does.
Yes. Also, they posted clips of my comedy to promote it.
Yeah.
But also, like, yeah, he's got it. Like, I've never gone to a show and I'm like, I sure hope I agree with this comedian. You know what I mean? I was at a place today and a guy was playing a Nick DiPaolo bit, and I can't imagine a comedian who I disagree with politically more than Nick DiPaolo. It was so fucking funny. Like, it's still funny.
Yeah. No, that's a Twitter mentality too. I mean, you have so many people that are like, I don't agree with you. I have to tell you why I don't agree, and you should agree with me. And then you look and they have like 12 followers, and you're like, well, no one seems to agree with you. If I agreed with you, I'd probably also have 12 followers. We wouldn't be in this position right now.
Yeah. So I bring up the mayor thing. People laugh, but this dude and his wife have been arms crossed, closed off to humor for the majority of it. I actually think there was a couple points where he laughed, but then, like, I have a joke where I mentioned Trump's name. I'm not making any value judgments on Trump or Trump supporters. I'm making fun of hipsters and liberals way more in the bit than I am about that. But it's like, I want every bit to come out as fair. It's not every comic has to do that, I don't think, but that's what I want out of my comedy. I don't want it. I say this on stage. I say, I don't want you to know who I voted for when I leave stage. And then I also say, it's getting harder to admit I voted for Kanye. That's, but, so anyways, this dude, I go into this, I talk about the mayor and I go, is he a good mayor? And he goes, no. And then other people in the audience start arguing that he is a good mayor with him. And they're like the very obviously liberal people in the audience. And then like they're literally like a political argument starts to break out. And I go, sorry, I don't want to do this. I fucked up. Please don't. And I'm like, trying to stop all this. And then he goes, I could elaborate if you want. And I was like, dude, it's okay. Please don't. And then he goes,
that would be his dream. He
right.
just wants to be the center of attention.
Yes. And then he goes, it's just hard as people who've actually spent time with him to like, whatever, to not, or to respect him. Let's say, and I'm like, it's okay. I fucked up because they're like continuing to argue. Like everyone wants to get the last word. The liberals in the crowd are equally at fault because they keep wanting to argue with him. And then he goes, we could swing by his condo after. And I'm like, I'm not committing a fucking crime with you tonight. Okay. and then he goes, well, it's just people like you who keep getting him reelected because you don't want to look racist. And I was like, then I dropped this fucking Kanye line on him, and I watched him laugh at that, but then like the rest of the show, he's just arms crossed, fucking angry, and I keep like, it's too hard to not point it out that he's acting like a fucking toddler, and so I fucking too many times, at least one too many, maybe two too many times, I kept referring back to him. Like I made a joke about not paying taxes. I was like, you like that one? Is that one good enough for you? Like and he did not enjoy it at any point.
If you make yourself the beacon of controversy at a comedy show, like he probably enjoyed the attention, honestly.
Yeah,
but
that's probably true.
At the same time, you are going to be the source of some material the rest of the night.
Yes. And so then, we had drove back to Bozeman from Helena, long travel day so we leave Missoula, go to Helena, come back to Bozeman, and then wake up. We get back to Bozeman like 1 in, wake up at 5 in, fly out, get here, and have to become a father and a husband again. Which
that's a tough turnaround after a weekend like that. But you really saw all that Montana has to offer. 3 of the biggest cities.
Yeah, I think 4 of the biggest cities. I've been to the only other place I've been to a place called Townsend, which is decidedly not. We golfed in a town called Livingston, and
Livingston's fairly popular. Yeah.
Is it? And I've performed in Kalispell one time.
Kalispell's somewhat popular.
Yeah, Kalispell's cool. It was on Flathead Lake, Flathead Lake Brewing Company, which, by the way, shout out to them. Very, very cool space there. I'd love to go back. The problem is they only do comedy when the weather sucks. So you're like, well, I'd love to go back when I could like enjoy Kalispell, but it's like, oh no, it's fucking dumping snow and there's deer all over the highway. Want to come do comedy in Kalispell? It's a tough time. I don't want to take away from, I would like to hear what you've been up to because we've been at this for 30 minents. We almost recorded a podcast last week and we could not figure out the tech. We were going to do one remotely.
Yeah, it was all bad.
It was all, and that's, by the way, part of the deal is it's been a couple months since I've gone on the road because my wife is on the verge of birthing life. Yeah. And it's just like hard.
You're back into it now.
Yeah. I'm going to have one more road weekend and then I'm done with the road. I'm doing everything I do comedy-wise until our kid is born. I will sleep in my own bed that night. I'll be sleeping in my bed every night until then. But so a couple weeks I'll be in Spokane and then I'm all over the Puget Sound after that. And before and after we have the kid, and then maybe during I'll do a set in the hospital.
A little waiting room.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, so we planned on doing it, and then a bunch of stuff has happened since then because the NFL draft happened.
We really picked like the weirdest week to not do one. We
I
have
know.
We have NBA and NHL playoffs. We have the NFL draft. Baseball's obviously going.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers got traded finally.
A lot going on. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers. Wow.
Like I almost don't even think I don't care about the Aaron Rodgers thing anymore.
It had such a big buildup. It was a months-long buildup. It felt like, and he finally got traded. The only thing that was interesting about it is that people thought the Packers got a lot more than they probably should have. When you're only negotiating with one team, when you're basically bidding against yourself if you're the Jets.
My understanding though is that the Jets actually had a more lucrative offer, and then when Rodgers came out of his literal hole. his dark hole. He said that at one point he was like 90% planning on retiring, and that Woody Johnson decided like, oh, we better renegotiate at that point.
Yeah.
So
No, it was, I'm glad to see that he's not in the NFC. It's good for the Seahawks, even if even if you think he's towards the end of his line. It's probably there's really just not that many good quarterbacks in the NFC right now.
it's wild. The NFC, like when you looked at the Pro Bowl roster last year, you were like, oh, there's like 3 guys that didn't make the Pro Bowl who could have made the Pro Bowl if they were in the NFC.
There's really not that many good. I mean, there's a lot of you've got like the up and comer types, you know, like a Kyler Murray, for example, but a lot of these guys just haven't proven anything. And so, yeah, the AFC is where it's at. I guess it's good for the Seahawks. They have kind of a wide open door to.
Well, so tell me though, what have you been up to the last? 2
what
weeks?
have I been up to?
Because we don't even like. Hold on, you and I talk more than we ever have.
Yeah.
But it's here. We text a little bit. We probably actually text more than we ever have. But it's like I'm not
The
like
daily
I'm not a
selfies
needy
are
friend.
nice.
Yeah, that's. You did get to see my penis in 4 Montana cities, but I'm not a needy friend. So we don't like. I'm not like bothering you all the time. What have you been up to, Alex? How's it's been 2 weeks?
Oh man, really not a whole lot. Just a lot of housework. We got AC installed.
Hell
which
yeah.
is pretty awesome.
How do you feel in this room now? Do you feel even less acclimated to this room? Yes.
Still quite warm. No, it is really nice because we actually had 2 days that were in the mid 70s, about 80 degrees.
Yeah.
Where we actually got to use it. So, I used to be one of those people. That complained about the hot. When it gets to be over 90 here, everyone starts complaining because 1 out of 4 homes has air conditioning.
Yeah.
And now we are part of that 25%. So
Part of the 25%. Wow.
I won't be complaining anymore, but I will try to empathize with all the people.
All the poors?
All the poors that are
The poors
boiling
and
in their
worthlesses?
homes.
Yeah.
It's not cheap to get central air conditioning installed in your house. Luckily, in the city of Tacoma, they have a program for that where they help subsidize it. So we took advantage of that. That was very nice.
I wonder, when does this program expire?
I think you can do it. You have an opportunity. I can walk you through it.
All right, that would be nice. Let's just do that the rest of the podcast. Fuck this podcast. Let's get air conditioning in here.
It's pretty nice to have.
That's good.
Yeah, that's about it. Other than that, just being old.
Yes.
The usual.
Yes. I will say, like, you lead a surprisingly uneventful, like, social life.
I do. I prefer to stay at home.
Yes.
I feel like I got most of it out in my 20s. When I would write and have my own website, and that really like allowed me to flourish on Twitter, if you will.
Yeah.
I would actively seek out trouble in so many words. I'd go out and like.
You'd call a Montana guy a racist. I get it.
Go out and do things and see what came my way, and that keeps you entertained for sure. But now I'm in domestic life, and I prefer it that way, man. I'd much rather just be at home, not doing anything, watching sports, commenting on it, and I feel like that's my contemporaries are doing the same. That's what people do now. Post-pandemic, no one wants to leave their house.
That's true. I am very annoyed. I just discovered a camera was off. Very annoying. I'm not sure how long it's been off. It's the one on me. It's the most important camera in my world.
It's going to be a lot of me this episode, just sitting and reacting.
So the day I leave for Montana is the first day, is round 1 of the NFL draft.
It is. Yeah.
And it was exciting. The Seahawks had the 5th pick. There was a lot of anticipation. I made some pretty declarative statements about how everyone was getting it wrong. There's no way the Seahawks are going to draft a defensive back and a wide receiver in the first round. That's not a position they value in the first round. There's no way that will be who they draft in the first round with their first 2 picks. It's going to be a guy in the trenches. They're drafting someone in the trenches.
No trenches. For how weird that draft started. With picking a cornerback, and the immediate reaction is, what the fuck? And then, of course, people start coming out saying, hey, this is the best cornerback in the draft.
Yeah.
It might not be what people thought the Seahawks were going to take, but he is a really good player, and he fits what they like to do. For how weird it started, it really only got better from there.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I mean, like, as a corner, I used to like write mock drafts and shit like that. I don't do that anymore because I don't write anything anymore. and it's tough to do a mock draft on a comedy stage. They're not really into it usually.
There's nothing less funny than mock drafts or mock draft people. Like the people, I understand if you're like a paid professional or, you're getting some benefit of creating a mock draft on a site or a blog or whatever.
They're great for traffic. It's like an SEO
Yeah,
dream.
that's true because they do get a lot of clicks. But there are always the people on social media that you see that like they have no affiliation with even their own site or blog. They just create a mock draft, and then they'll reference it throughout the entire draft. Here's the rest of my big board. Here's who I think. Here's who the Seahawks should take next. That sort of thing. It's like literally no one's asking you, and you don't.
How dare you, Alex? How dare you?
You don't have the self-awareness to know that, like, if I was doing that, right? Like, if I was doing that, I'd be making fun of it as I do it at the same time. At least make it unique and interesting.
Sure.
But most of these people, they're dead serious. They're like, I'm going to replace Mel Kiper. No one's asking me to.
Yes.
But I'm going to.
I did write for Walter Football at one time, and he is very much doing that exact thing. He's Walter Cherepinski, by the way, who, like, that website, it still feels a little bit like a GeoCities website, but it's like, it's the easiest place to find like a short scouting report on a prospect, like free agent rankings, grades, and shit. It's like very easy to find there. It's all he does. You don't have to sift through a bunch of like, well, here's fucking Justin Forsett's mock draft. It's like these two guys who are relatively informed on the draft, and they do it. It's another dude named Charlie Campbell. Devin Witherspoon's a guy who's very good. He is like, I didn't think they would draft a corner that high, but he's great. He's exactly here. Well, I mean,
everybody said that was right about where he should be drafted, 5 to 10. And look, I'm no expert, so I have no idea.
No, and that's like, first off, I don't want to get this into like we're gonna give meaningful analysis on any of these picks. I think that he is a very good player. I could quibble with like the positional value of corner. I also think they're very good at drafting defensive backs, and later in like they can find diamonds in the rough. I did hear a thing in this draft that there were no like egregious fuck ups by any team, which is like that's where the Seahawks have historically taken advantage of these guys like Tariq Woolen, who just like fell. Even though he was one of the most athletically gifted players in the draft at any position.
Or the DK year was a really good example, too. I mean, DK, after the combine, was projected as like as high as a top 10 pick, and then he falls to the second round, and the Seahawks take advantage of that.
Sure, but the Seahawks also missed him in the first round. That's that was a weird one where everybody, like every fan was like, draft this fucking guy. Like to every team, they're like, he's got to be going here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the unique thing about this year's draft is the teams kept it really close to the vest. I mean, usually with NFL drafts, you always get like some idea of like how the top 5 are going to go.
Yeah.
Like you get like, okay, the number one, you hear about the team who has the number 1 pick negotiating a contract with the guy they want to take. Yeah. And then that kind of creates this.
So that's kind of, I was on a plane and then driving to Billings.
I didn't see that.
Because I wasn't sure. So my belief was we were going to see basically kind of like the framework of what happened, which it was going to go quarterback, defensive player if Arizona kept the pick.
Yeah.
And then they end up trading to Houston, who wanted to draft a defensive player. Then another quarterback at Indianapolis. And then the Seahawks were going to take who the fuck knows. And by the way, they've again eluded every expert. I never saw a single mock draft with Devin Witherspoon.
The Seahawks are really good. I mean, it's the crazy thing about the Seahawks. If you have ever hung around the VMAC, Dino's Pub is just right across the street from the Seahawks practice facility. I used to live right behind it for years, and you go there, like, on most nights, John Schneider is there drinking.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of the personnel go over there and drink, too. So you got this situation where people that work for the team just go out in public and drink with, like, other people, and this stuff doesn't get out. That's amazing. Wild. It's fucking amazing because I can't imagine there are a ton of teams where that happens, where you have, like, a bar that is, within a driver's length away from your practice facility that all the coaches and personnel go to, right? And it's like you would just have to think that at some point they'd slip up, right?
Yeah.
Maybe one too many beers or something.
There's something about being a Seattle coach or front office guy. Oh my God, what is going on with this camera? There's something about that causes people to become severe drinkers.
It's probably the region. I mean, it's so depressing here. You know, for 9 months out of the year when it's gray and rainy, like you can't really go outside, so you just kind of stay inside and drink. You know? Yeah, there's something to that.
Let's pause real quick.
Yeah,
I think I know the problem. So anyway, we had a brief intermission that I don't know how I'm going to edit, so I'm going to acknowledge it here. That if we don't have to edit it, my dog's in the background. Laney's. We have an audience. We didn't mention that at the beginning. So then, yeah, I mean, I guess like the rest of here's what I'll say is the Seahawks. When I watched, so the Eagles had basically the exact draft that I wanted. They drafted Jalen Carter, who I love. They drafted Nolan Smith, who was like huge workout warrior, was liked a lot. They drafted, actually, let's pull up the Eagles because they had a couple picks. Did my dog lick your is she licking your leg right now? No, my sister's dogs,
not my leg.
Ooh, I always park at my sister's house. Oh, I will say one thing that the Seahawks did that I hated, second round running back. But
you knew they were going to do it.
I know. Well, I didn't.
I mean, maybe not second round, but
I knew they would take one. I didn't think they would take Laney. Get on your bed. Come on. Having a dog in the studio is a problem. So the Eagles drafted Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Tyler Steen is an Alabama tackle. I actually don't know a ton about him. Sidney Brown, defensive back from Illinois, played alongside one Devin Witherspoon. Keely Ringo is actually born in Tacoma. He's like a big, strong corner. I would have been happy if the Seahawks drafted him in the second round. He falls to the fourth to the Eagles.
Yeah, they took all these guys from Georgia. I actually, every now and then, because I listen to another sports radio, I'll hear, draft assessments on guys. And a lot of people didn't like Ringo because they said he was too stiff. He wouldn't be mobile enough to play, as a cornerback in the NFL. Maybe they move him to like safety or something like that. But the Seahawks are, no team I feel like knows defensive backs better than the Seahawks do. So
I agree with that. I also think no team is better at taking guys who get projected to be safeties and turning them into pretty good corners.
Yeah, they typically like the big, rangy defensive back, which is why Witherspoon at number 5 was so interesting because he's not big and rangy, but he's supposedly one of the fiercest players you'll ever see play the game of football. That's what everybody's saying.
And I do think he's like it's also funny because the definition of big has changed. Like when Pete Carroll took over the Seahawks, he would have been considered a big corner. And now because the Seahawks have had these corners, Brandon Browner, Richard Sherman, Tariq Woolen, and many other guys along the way who have been effective cornerbacks. Now, like a 6'2" corner is not that crazy. A lot of guys, it seems like it's even changed the college game where you see a lot more of those guys switching from receiver to corner.
The thing about the Seahawks is they always seem to be the team that wants to start the trend, right? It actually happened in this draft with their 20th pick, Smith and Jigba, with the receiver from Ohio State. He's the first receiver taken off the board. He's generally considered to be the best one. As soon as the Seahawks take him, 3 other teams take receivers right after them. So they start this run on receivers.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're always trying to do that in drafts. It's like if they'll pick somebody and hope it like sparks everyone else to react. And a lot of times it does. That's kind of smart, rather than following the trend.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily true that it's like, one, I don't think they're actually trying to start a trend. I think I don't think they really care about who gets drafted the picks after. I do think the Smith and Jigba, Jackson Smith and Jigba, was going to be somebody is going to, by the way, butcher his name in a way that gets them fired in Seattle. There's just no way it's not going to happen.
His last name is like just the juxtaposition of the whitest possible name in America and Jigba.
Yes.
It's just hilarious.
But so he's like consensus top receiver. I actually didn't think he was that incredible, but I'm willing to acknowledge that the Seahawks almost always go against the grain. I've almost never picked like Russell Okung. I was pretty sure, but Earl Thomas, I was like not sold they were going to pick him. Another thing about that, by the way, is to take a first-round DB, them knowing DBs as well as they do, you got to believe they know something special. They know that Witherspoon's going to be special.
I think the Seahawks, maybe more than a lot of teams, and maybe all teams are like this, but it always seems the Seahawks have kind of like their own unique culture. So many of these teams draft to fit their system and their culture. Sure. I mean, I think that's where it's, if you're the type of person that's doing a mock draft, or even if you're one of the experts that gets paid to like forecast these types of things, a lot of times you're just looking at these players in a vacuum. You
Yeah.
know, like here's how they are independent of anything else. Here's how good they are at playing football. And when you get to the NFL, there's so much more that they have to take into consideration than that. You know, they care more about maybe your character than your talent in some cases. Obviously, talent's always going to win out, but they really want to find the right fit for guys in their locker room, on their practice field. And I'm not sure a lot of teams even worry about that. I think a lot of teams do just solely look at the tangible things within a vacuum.
Yeah, well, yes. And I think that I also think there's like the Seahawks big board has to look different than a lot of teams. Like they have a different, it seems like it's good and bad, right? It makes you draft Jermaine Ifedi in the first round.
Yeah.
It makes you draft guys who, who's the dude? God damn it, I can't even think of his name now. Defensive end, like maybe end tackle kind of, recently. The guy that's like, he was a first round pick, I think.
Malik McDowell?
No, he was a second round pick. God damn it. Hold on, we can figure this out quickly. He's like,
I pick up on where you're going.
It's like a recent
Darryl Taylor.
No, he was. I think he was a late pick, actually.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
You're gonna be pissed because it's gonna be a guy who was like you're gonna be pissed. You're gonna be.
I'm the type of person that as soon as I follow the Seahawks, I watch every game. But as soon as the draft is over, I just don't care anymore.
LJ Collier.
Oh, LJ Collier. Yeah, he sucked.
Yeah, that's a guy who like they obviously had and then another guy who like you look at this draft, we're looking at their draft picks, like every one of these guys, Rashad Penny was a surprise.
Well, if there's one argument to be made for them not taking a defensive lineman, their history with drafting defensive linemen is not very good. So maybe if you have the number 5 pick or even the number 20 pick, don't spend it on a position that you don't know very well.
Sure. I mean I guess I'll give them, Frank Clark, Jaron Reed.
I think they just what the Seahawks seem to really understand well is like the opportunity costs of things. Like I think they look at getting the very best cornerback in a draft and the very best receiver in a draft, and probably in some minds Charbonnet was the second or third best running back according to most people. So they feel like they probably got a lot of value there. They strictly look for the value play, and I think when it comes to people say they need interior linemen on both sides.
I don't even think I disagree with you completely. They draft guys who are like are way down the bit, like the consensus big board. So they'll draft a guy who's like there's 2nd through 5th defensive linemen are available, and they draft the 7th guy or something like that,
Yeah, I guess maybe I have recency bias because last year and this year, and even going back to like DK, it seems like they've gotten a lot better about this, but there was a period for between 5 and 10 years where they maybe weren't doing that as much.
Sure.
And maybe that's why they've kind of shifted course in the last couple of years. Yeah. Because I think they look around the NFL and they say, we can bring in interior linemen on both sides of the ball in free agency and they'll fit. What they haven't been able to do is bring in like skill position players and have them fit from free agency, or guys that fit like their defensive secondary, like a Jamal Adams type. Granted, he's been injured a lot, but I think they are like, when it comes to skill positions and when it comes to the secondary, they really want to mold guys that they draft. But when it comes to those other positions, they're like, hey, we can plug and play almost anybody and we'll be okay.
Yeah, and I will say this about their offseason specifically. I think they had like a perfect offseason because every time you'd be like, oh, they signed this guy. You're like, okay, well then maybe this is who they plan on drafting. And then they just filled every position of need, basically, outside of like they had signed a center, I believe. Wasn't like obvious that guy was going to be a starter. I don't know that there's this dude. I'm not going to even take a shot at his name without having some practice before this podcast. But the Michigan center is like
Big O.
Though he's a 50, double O's. He got.
I know that they're getting real liberal with jersey numbers, and if anyone should ever be number 00, it's
he
this
really
guy.
should. Wow,
it's this guy.
But he's like considered one of the smarter centers in the draft. Like he wasn't one of the guys, though, by the way, that was like the consensus top centers again, like a guy who's outside of that.
Yeah,
and even some of those guys got drafted after. But yeah, I think that they basically went in going best player available, which ultimately is what I want them to do. Now, do I agree? Like, where I will say, I don't like Charbonnet in the 2nd round, but it's like, I know it's going to happen. I know they value running backs differently than I do. I think they are fucking dumb in that regard. I think it's like they are very clearly missing what is obviously the actual value of that position. But I think they do really good at drafting other positions. So I'm not like, it's just like, it's like that is like when your uncle is like very sweet and nice, and you're like, he's a little bit racist though. So you got to live with that. But like, other than that, he's very nice to his neighbors and member of the community.
Yeah. Just because this is the Poor Sports podcast and we're giving a lot of good takes on football, I just want to give a shittier one because that's what we do here. In general, I feel like just like fans, experts, all those people know less about NFL and like the players and positions than almost in any other sport, right? Like in basketball, if you're an expert, you can look at a basketball player and just be like, that guy's good, that guy's not good. This guy's gonna profile to be in the NBA for 10 years. This guy will be at the YMCA next year.
Sure.
Pretty easy because you just don't have like the nuance in the positions that you do in football. Same thing with baseball. It's like you kind of have just a couple different types of positions, right? It's like you're either a good hitter, that's going to get you to the big leagues. It doesn't really matter what position you play. As long as you're somewhat athletic, they'll find a place for you, or you're a really good pitcher. With football, it's like you have so many different positions that do so many like very specific, unique things that it's really, really hard to like exactly understand how good somebody is or is not.
I agree with that. There's a lot of moving parts. It's hard to know, and I'm not sure if you're making a running backs are actually good argument.
No,
you're still wrong on that.
This is completely different from what the point you were making.
Because that's kind of the thing about running backs specifically that's tough, and where I agree with you, and I'll use running backs as the reason is you watch a running back make like a long productive run, and it's like, okay, but he had an enormous hole. The blocking was incredible. Downfield blocking was incredible. There's a lot of moving parts. And in basketball, especially in like this version of basketball, you get a lot more like one-on-one data. Like even if it's like not one-on-one, there's like inputs and it's obvious, like hand in his face 3-pointer is hand in his face 3-pointer. That is like a thing he might face at the next level. When you're like, oh, he's fast, but he has no field vision or whatever. Like we spend a lot of time on these running backs, and it's not really that running backs aren't good. It's that to be a good running back, it's so much more important to be a productive running back. It's so much more important that you have good blocking and good play calling and stuff like that.
Oh, for sure. There's a lot of dependencies, not just with running backs, but in the game of football as a whole. I mean, there is that in other sports
there's also
too,
a thing in football that's unlike those other sports, I think, which is you have a guy who like maybe could be, remember like there's like West Coast quarterbacks, and then there's like these like traditional pocket passer quarterbacks. There's guys who like are like very scheme dependent. A defensive end in a 3-4 maybe can't be a productive defensive end in a 4-3 because the requirements of those positions in those schemes is different. Though the positions are called the same thing, they're not the same thing. And so it's like in basketball you rarely have that, right? Maybe the one difference is now that we play this like positionless basketball, a guy like Tim Duncan, who was one of the greatest players of all time, might struggle in today's NBA.
That's probably why it's become even easier to forecast basketball. It's like basically they're looking for the biggest shooting guard at all 5 positions.
Yeah.
That's kind of what basketball is now. Where football, it's like it gets more and more nuanced. The thing, all of what you were just saying is kind of like why I think the mock draft process can be so silly at times, because I think a lot of it is a reaction to the combine, where again you're really isolating people to specific skill sets, and it's not taking into consideration the big picture of what they do. Like you can be a combine phenom but not know like how to read a scheme and fit within the rest of your team, right? It doesn't matter how fast you are if you're running in the wrong direction, right?
Yes.
Like you can be the fastest person on earth. If you're running in the wrong direction, you're not helping your football team. Or, you might just be a physical freak and a complete mental dud. You might be a total idiot. And I think that's like where when you get to the NFL level, that's where a lot of these teams start really doing their homework and they find out everything they can possibly find about it. Even though Draft Day was a terrible movie in general.
I've never seen it, and I kept seeing Draft Day jokes, and I'm like, I've never seen it. I know. Listen,
people that really closely follow the draft, there's only one movie that's ever been made about the NFL draft, really, and they really belabor the Draft Day jokes. Like, you got to use something else. You can't just keep using Kevin Costner memes.
So Draft Day, I believe, comes out like after I started doing comedy, so I know the comedy stuff, but like the draft is something I love still, but it's like I can't. My wife will not go watch draft day. There's no way. I tried to get some comics together to go see Uncle Drew in theaters, and I couldn't even do that. Like they're definitely not going to get comics to go see draft day. Anyways, I love the draft.
I liked Uncle Drew. Actually, I liked both.
We should have a fucking Patreon. If we ever have a Patreon, we got to have a draft day watch along and a Uncle Drew watch along.
Bad sports movies.
Yes.
Uncle Drew. Did you ultimately see Uncle Drew?
No.
Oh my God.
We could watch both these movies together. We could sit here and comment on them. It would be. I think that would be fun. If
Kyrie Irving hadn't gone off the deep end and become like a crazy person, I think he could legitimately have a career as an actor. He was.
Yeah, no, there's no crazy people that act. That's
well, I think it's just going to be harder to for a studio to want to do something.
Why is that, Alex? Is it because a certain group of people run Hollywood? Is that what you're saying? Wow,
the round earthers.
Round earthers. I want to finish on the Eagles draft because they did a thing that the Seahawks did not do. So there's Moro Ojomo, I think is how you pronounce it. The defensive tackle in the 7th round was a guy that I would have been happy with the Seahawks. There was one guy that the Seahawks did not draft. They had many shots at him. He was another guy. There was a bunch of Nigerian descent players in this draft. He was another one of them from Northwestern, defensive tackle that was like. The Cansey dude, Kalijah Cansey from Pittsburgh, they were giving a lot of Aaron Donald comps because he's from Pittsburgh. And he's like a short, athletic guy. But the dude, I always call him just Ade because he's like, it's a lot of name to pronounce. And I have an Anglo tongue that's going to make it sound stupid. But he's great. So anyways, they drafted Tanner McKee in the 6th round. And I will say one of my frustrations with the Seahawks, and I think what gets us to this point where they're like completely handcuffed to Russell Wilson for a half decade, and where, Geno Smith turned out to be very good, but to go into camp with Geno Smith and Drew Lock as the guys last year was pretty discouraging as a fan. And I would have liked to have at least seen a 6th, 7th round guy. They brought in a guy as an undrafted free agent, but I remember when John Snyder came to Seattle, he said, I want to draft a quarterback every year. And then they've drafted one quarterback since Russell Wilson.
Yeah. Well, it's tough. In a good way, it's tough when you have one guy who dominates the position for so long.
Sure.
It almost feels like a wasted pick, even in the 6th or the 7th round if you do that. I agree that now the quarterback situation is a lot less secure for the long term. You've got Geno signed for a couple years, and who knows what Drew Lock is.
Yeah.
But they probably still, they look at it as like, I would be shocked if next year they didn't draft a quarterback somewhere along the way.
Yeah. Although I do think if you look at, I might be a little more optimistic about Drew Lock's potential than the average person because I wanted Drew Lock to win the starting job.
Yeah, I think most people did.
And so I think if I take myself back there, and back then I thought Drew Lock and Geno Smith were roughly equivalent quarterbacks. Geno Smith had a very good 2022, but I wouldn't be surprised if these same evaluators who had them roughly equal back then are like, well, we have two of the same guy. And so that's to me Drew Lock's still very young. There's still potential for him to be like the quote unquote quarterback of the future. You almost have to with the way I don't even think this is on our list, but Lamar Jackson signed a deal that's going to average over $50 million a year. That is where the quarterback position is going. And I do think the Seahawks, one thing that they're zagging when everyone else zigs or zigging when everyone else zags, whatever the expression is they have made it so their quarterback position, and this is something my dad said this last season, and it's very frustrating to agree with my dad on a sports thing I argued with against him real hard, but they want that position to be plug and play. And if you can use $30 extra million in cap space on other positions, we might have reached the point where you can't have a quarterback at that much of your cap space.
Well, yeah, this is again, I think, getting back to my point about the Seahawks looking for the opportunity cost and the value. They understand that if you're devoting that much money to your quarterback, that's money you're taking away from literally every other position on the field. And they want to shore up all the other positions on the I think the recipe that a lot of teams have now is you have an amazingly good defense and offense in all other facets, and you have a quarterback on his rookie contract or a very cheap contract at least that puts you over the top and gets you to the Super Bowl. And that's what the Seahawks did when they had Russell Wilson. I mean, that's the situation they were looking at. They had spent their free agent dollars in other places, and they were able to not have to pay their quarterback much and could win. And I think that's kind of what they're working towards again, which is part of the reason why you have the short-term deal for Geno. And then if you draft a guy next year, if you want to spend some draft capital there on a good quarterback, you already have all the other pieces in place to have a winner, right? You have a good defense. You have great skill position players on offense. Hopefully by then you have two good lines. So you have everything in place that you need to be a winner. And so spending that money now, even if it's just a 6th-round draft pick or a 7th-round draft pick, just doesn't, for them, it probably just doesn't make a ton of sense because it's like, that's wasted money. That guy's never going to see the field if all goes well.
You're paying Drew Lock more than him. Is what I'll say.
Well, okay, so yeah, you're saying you want to sacrifice Drew, but you're
not necessarily. I mean, I guess like having a practice squad guy that you drafted in the 7th round, I don't have a big problem. I just want to see more quarterbacks around. I would have liked it if by now there was like kind of a rotating backup, like. Like I would have liked them to have drafted Jacob Eason. Obviously, they ended up having a shot at having him on the roster for a little while. But like having a guy like that around, just having these guys that like they don't even need to turn into. I mean, like look at what happened in San Francisco this year. They had 2 guys. They went in with 2 guys that were considered like, by them at least starter caliber, and they still end up with fucking Christian McCaffrey taking snaps at quarterback in the playoffs. Like having guys, they had Brock Purdy, they drafted late. They drafted a guy in the 7th round despite having 2 guys on the roster who were...
Yeah, I actually heard someone talking about this prior to the draft, about kind of the Brock Purdy effect and how teams this year were going to do exactly what the Eagles did, which is just start like throwing your late round picks at quarterbacks, any quarterback, because it was the Hail Mary play, right? Like, if all goes to hell, this guy might actually see playing time. And if he succeeds the way Purdy did, then all of a sudden you have this incredibly valuable asset that you can either...
That's exactly the point.
You can either choose to keep deploying. But I think for
the upside is very high because it's the most important position in football.
It's the analogy that they used on the radio segment I heard.
If they were disagreeing with me, I don't like this analogy.
Well, they weren't necessarily disagreeing, but they were talking about it as like a slot machine, right? Like, drafting a quarterback with a 6th or 7th round pick is like putting your dollar in a slot machine that very infrequently pays out. I mean, they all infrequently pay out, but one that very, very infrequently pays out, but it has an enormous jackpot versus putting your dollar in a machine that is going to have a much better chance of paying you some return on your investment, but the jackpot value is not very high.
I'd quibble slightly. I think that the post 4th round, and I actually think it's moving a little bit into the 5th round, but like those late picks at any position, unless they are a position that's of extremely low individual importance, like kicker, punter, running back, like those types of positions, they're all slot machines.
The Seahawks don't see it that way, though.
I know,
and they never have, and but I think they have the right to that because they've found so much value.
They've had 3 good drafts, but they've been 3 like by the way, this draft I will say was consistently ranked incredibly high by every expert. So
they did well,
and I was happy with it. While there were like individual personnel, I probably would have like this Ade dude who I won't try to pronounce his full name. I would have loved I would have been happy if they took him at 20. I would have been happy if they took him, and I think he went in the 4th round to the Colts. I would have been. He was like. I would put him I was very high on him. He was like a perfect fit for what I think they're trying to do defensively. Didn't work out. I'm not going to quibble with it too much. The dude they took in the 2nd round, the what's his name?
Derek Hall.
Derek Hall, yeah. Who's like to me he seems like
thank you.
Jesus Christ.
We raise our hands.
That was fucking alarming. Derek Hall feels like just a generic edge rusher to me. Whatever. That's fine. I trust they know something I don't know. I just would like, in general, I would like to see even like Kenny McIntosh out of Georgia that I actually like as a 7th rounder. He's like the perfect time to draft like a pass catching running back. Again, I think that guy's a lottery ticket also. with a very low payout, like you said.
Yeah, he'll actually have a better chance to like see the playing field just because they have like no running backs.
Well,
until this
but that's
draft,
also where they get like, where did their running backs that they're trying to replace come from? They all came from late round picks. Like that's like Travis Homer was like nearly an undrafted free agent.
Yeah, no, they have had
Chris Carson was a 7th rounder. Like they're actually really good.
They
drafting high. They drafted Rashad Penny and played him behind a 7th rounder his whole fucking time in
the
Seattle.
Rashad Penny selection obviously was bad. It didn't go well.
Sure.
But I think a lot of that, if you ask them, they would probably blame it on his health, which is rightful in a lot of ways. He couldn't stay healthy.
Sure.
And when he was healthy, I mean, you saw how good he was. When he was healthy, he was an amazing running back.
Well, I actually think one of the things they get underappreciated for, especially through the years where they had bad, quote unquote, bad drafts, is they've always had the offensive line got shit on because Russell Wilson got sacked a lot. But what we've all kind of learned through the analytics and like I think some maybe the like anecdotal stuff is that sacks are not purely an offensive line stat.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that we know now the sacks are on Russ.
Sure.
He was back there ad-libbing, running around,
Yes.
not doing anything that he was supposed to be doing,
Yes.
and it worked, so he got to keep doing it.
So,
It just
but they've
made his
always
linemen
had
look bad.
like throughout Russell Wilson's entire career, they've had a strong running game, and it's always been hard for me to go, well, the offensive line sucks because there's all these sacks, but suddenly you can drop a fucking nobody behind in the backfield and have them be a guy that rushes for 5.5 yards a carry. Like that's always been to me like a very obvious logical disconnect that people have had. I don't even know if we have that much else. I love the draft so much. I could fucking argue with you about this. What else do we even have on our list?
Dillon Brooks. Yeah, Dillon Brooks.
Oh, Dillon Brooks. We do have something to watch today. I forgot. So, well, and this is fun.
I hate Dillon Brooks, and I have for a long time.
Yeah,
because
so-
he was an Oregon Duck.
Yeah, so that's Dillon Brooks to me. First off, I'm college basketball is difficult to watch if you don't have like one of a couple providers for TV. I think maybe I have Pac-12 Network now, but maybe not. I think maybe it was just on when I had Fubo for a brief stretch.
Yeah, Pac-12's, they did themselves no favors.
Yeah.
It's very tough to watch Pac-12 basketball. In many ways, even if you're watching it, it can be tough.
So I've been like, during the Mike Hopkins era, it's also been a little tough to watch Huskies basketball.
Huskies
so.
have been terrible. No reason to watch.
So Dillon Brooks, he's one of these guys where I was like, well, maybe he's underappreciated. I look at a guy, I was blown away. Sometime last year, I looked at, Draymond Green, his like career stats, and you're like, oh, I was like, he's probably like a borderline Hall of Famer. And then you're like, oh, he's like a 0-double guy. And so he's got like this reputation as a good defender. The analytics may or may not back it up. I don't know. I go look at Dillon Brooks, and I'm like, he's a bad shooter. There's no doubt about that. He's a bad shooter. He's like they call him a streaky shooter, which is usually a euphemism for bad shooter. Yeah. Usually a streaky shooter is a bad shooter that takes too many shots.
I've been called a streaky shooter playing basketball, so yeah, I understand that.
So then I'm like, well, he must be good on defense. Terrible on defense by analytics. But he's a guy that's like 6'6", big body. He's a guy that I think is becoming less respected in basketball, but a guy that I always liked as a fan of basketball, which is the 3-and-D guy, like the Bruce Bowen, the fucking Thibault, I thought C.J. Wilcox would eventually develop into one of these guys. Like it's not, it's not just guys.
He's a tweener that grinds really hard,
right?
And his position is basically being phased out in today's NBA in a lot of ways because.
Nate McMillan was one of these guys, kind of. I mean, Nate McMillan could play a little point guard.
Nate McMillan's a good comp in a lot of ways because he's the same height. So Nate McMillan's 6'6", but he was a point guard by trade, which really helped him because he's a big point guard. And that was the era of everyone trying to find the next Magic Johnson.
Yeah,
so
and he could guard a 3, he could guard a 2.
He was a great defender. Nate McMillan, great defender. Dillon Brooks is 6'6", and he's kind of like a small forward. Like the 6'6" small forward doesn't really exist. Dillon Brooks is kind of like amazing that he's even had an NBA career for as long as he has. He left Oregon 1 year early. He became a second-round draft pick, which no guarantees with the second-round draft pick. But he actually stuck. He stuck with Memphis, and he's made his career there. And now here he comes, and he just wants to be more than he is. He just up and decided right now that he wanted to be more than he is. And the way that he was going to go about doing that is by being a heel.
So I just watched a documentary that's on Amazon Prime about J.R. Smith.
Yeah.
And J.R. Smith is a guy who I became enamored with as a prospect. He's like the perfect. This is gonna get a little bit little weird. I think he's roughly my age, by the way. I think he's 36 years old. Perfect basketball body, like 6'6", and he can shoot, he can dunk, he can.
Another streaky shooter, but
yes, but he's a guy that I actually think I bet his shooting numbers are significantly better than Dillon Brooks. But a guy who I will say has some very memorable mental fuck ups.
A lot of boneheaded moments. That's what he's remembered for.
But of course, we see Steph Curry the other day calls a timeout he doesn't have. Steph Curry's legacy will never be this timeout that he didn't have. His legacy is he's been lucky enough to be Steph Curry to be very clutch, and J.R. Smith was unlucky in times like that. But I think J.R. Smith's career was underappreciated. J.R. Smith became a college golfer. It's a really cool documentary. I kind of like Dillon Brooks is a guy where I'm like. So the other thing J.R. Smith did that I think is interesting and hard to measure is the Dennis Rodman thing, where he just became just a pain in the ass for opposing players. He's untying shirts and he's some of it's in good fun, or untying shoes. Some of it's in good fun, some of it's not in good fun. But remember, Dennis Rodman fucked with Karl Malone so much in that. I think it was the 96-97 finals.
Yeah,
and you're I don't know. I have to imagine it took points off the board that Karl Malone would have scored.
I mean, yeah, there is real value in being an instigator in basketball. Mm-hmm. You kind of have to read your opponent. There's some opponents it's not going to phase them, so you're wasting your energy trying to mess with them in the way that you do with some other guys. But other guys, it's hey, if they're the best player on the other team and you can get inside their head, even for half a second, it's totally worth it. That's what Dillon Brooks was trying to do.
Right.
In this situation, he's trying to emulate Rodman. He's trying to emulate guys like Draymond Green and get inside LeBron James's head. But hey, if you're going to go after the best, I mean, you watch, there's been a lot of documentaries on Michael Jordan over the years, and he's the prime example of somebody you don't go after, because every time someone did go after him, it ended poorly for the most part, right? And that's the same thing with LeBron. Dillon Brooks goes after LeBron. It does not go well. If you're going to go after the best, you got to succeed. That's the thing. It's nothing. I don't think Dillon Brooks really did anything wrong, but his legacy is going to be that he challenged the best and it went poorly. He missed.
Yeah.
If you're going to take that shot at the best, you cannot miss.
Yeah, it's that. I think the saying is if you're going to shoot for the king, you best not miss.
Yep.
And this guy called himself the king coming out of high school. So, so this is him.
For some people, Lakers are making that run.
He's being interviewed here. Has just absolutely insane sunglasses.
Maybe you shouldn't do that with one of the better players in the game. What were you thinking?
I don't care. He's old. You know what I mean? I was waiting for that. I was expecting him to do that game 4, game 5. He wanted to say something when I got my 4th foul. He should have been saying that earlier on. But, I poke bears. I don't respect no one until they come and give me 40. I pride myself on, what I do is defense and taking on any challenge that's on the board.
Okay, so first I want to point out the outfit a little bit, because some folks just listen. More people listen than watch. It's a very so it's like a flannel kind of, no shirt on underneath it. Got an iced out DB Dillon Brooks chain.
It's gigantic. Yeah.
The glasses are insane. They're futuristic Lego glasses is what they look like to me.
Yeah.
It's somebody who is certainly buying into their own character.
I mean, everybody, the comp on the internet was that he was going full WWE wrestler.
Right.
As soon as the spotlight shone on Dillon Brooks for half a second, the next day he shows up as a WWE character almost. It's almost like it happened so quickly. It seems like when you have guys like Draymond, Bruce Bowen, who you reference, Rodman, they were always true to themselves. There was at least some process of evolution from them becoming just some other guy to the instigator that they were known for. Dillon Brooks, it like happened overnight.
Right. Well,
then it blew up on top of that.
Yeah, he's like he went from being Bruce Bowen to Dennis Rodman overnight. Basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because like Bruce Bowen, even Draymond Green, though Draymond Green talks a lot of shit, and we just live in a time where he's on social media. Bruce Bowen played before social media. Maybe he's also a lunatic, but Bruce Bowen was like he's bringing his lunch pail, coming to work, playing hard every day, right?
Draymond's that way too.
Exactly, but he also is a maniac
Yeah.
online and in interviews, which
Right.
I don't remember any Bruce Bowen things being like that kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And then Dillon Brooks is like the evolution beyond that.
I mean, and even Rodman had an evolution. Rodman was just like an average-looking guy for the first half of his career. He goes to San Antonio, but he starts small. It's like colors the hair a little bit,
Right.
gets like a piercing, a tattoo, and then slowly builds up
And then
to what you know
marries
of him.
himself eventually.
To what you know of him as with the Bulls, where he's got everything going on, right?
Yeah.
But there was at least a process there over time that we all got to witness. With Dillon Brooks, it's like yesterday you were nobody. Today you think you're the biggest thing in basketball. The spotlight is squarely on you at this point in
Right.
time, and you have to deliver. Once the spotlight's on you, you have to deliver. And, you know, it's almost like he was throwing a Hail Mary on his career. Like today, it's funny because today Memphis announced they're not going to bring him back. This was his contract year. They decided we're not bringing this guy back under any circumstance.
Well, that's funny. Also, like, I mean, we know now they lost the series. When this was on our list from last week, the series was still in doubt. LeBron never put 40 on him, but they beat him like I think it was like 6 different leading scorers throughout the games. I do want to bring, this is like a very Draymond Green thing, obviously.
Yeah.
I just want, because you're a filthy, dirty basketball player.
To the Lakers.
So here's
a look at it.
They kept showing this angle. He hit LeBron James in the nuts.
This is becoming Dillon Brooks'
right there
thing.
with the
Yeah.
left
Okay,
This will be
so
fascinating.
this is one of the ones where I'm like, this was very obviously intentional. This one seems very obviously intentional.
He had one. We talked about one just a few weeks
Was that
back.
Dillon Brooks?
Yes.
Jesus,
he
Dillon
hit,
Brooks.
He hit Donovan Mitchell in the
That's
nuts.
right.
He look, at least he saves it for the best. If you're some scrub on the other team, your nuts are safe.
Yeah,
but if
that's
you're
nice.
the best player on the other team, you might want to wear a cup, man.
Yeah, this is a strange thing that's happening in basketball. I typically would like kind of hard-nosed guys like this, but it's
It's
tough.
too far. Every man has a line, and the line is
Yeah.
hitting people in the nuts in general. I don't know. Do you remember the one that Reggie Evans did on Chris Kaman like 10
No,
or
but I
15
think we
years
can
ago?
we probably can pull
he,
this up.
He didn't just hit him in the nuts. He full on milked those things, dude.
Man, Reggie Evans was really like the fun like
There was an incident in that game involving Reggie Evans and Chris Kaman that folks are talking about, and Chris Kaman none too happy about this. As you see in the paint, why did he push Reggie Evans down? Because we'll slow it down.
Slow it down.
What do you mean he wasn't too happy? Why would he be happy about that?
Reggie Evans reached up under there, grabbed those things
From
and
behind.
yanked.
so
Usually you have to pay for
wow.
that action.
Wow. Well, so you'd always hear those stories about like fumble scrums or whatever, where people would be grabbing each other's nuts and stuff like that. Maybe you didn't hear those stories. Maybe you haven't read the same Penthouse Forum letters as I have. That one's a little. Reggie Evans is a guy who will always just bring me back to the not late Kevin Calabro, but the later years of Kevin Calabro calling Seattle Sonics games. Like, because I love Dave Niehaus like we all do. In Seattle, we're contractually obligated. You can't be in the city limits if you don't love Dave Niehaus. But for my money, Kevin Calabro is the best announcer Seattle ever had.
Yeah, he was very good. He was always one of my favorites, and it was respected nationally because he got
Sure.
to do a lot of national games. There's so many guys that are just like Niehaus is a good example that are so ingrained in like the regional aspect of the team that they're not ever going to be seen on a national level. Really.
You would listen to Calabro and you'd be like, he is good, but when he's doing national games and he's not pandering to the local audience, it's not as fun because he was a fucking crazy man here.
Yeah, he was very embedded in the fabric of the community.
For my money, him and Marcus Johnson might have been the best announcing team, like like that I've ever experienced in any way.
They were definitely one of the best pairings. Usually you don't have like it seemed like they had known each other for forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Marcus Johnson was a former player.
Yeah.
Like that's the way you get the play-by-play guy is the non-former player typically, and then the color guy is the former player. But they were both like obviously, I mean, Calabro's like lifelong student of basketball, basically.
Oh, there is a we'll get back to the ball grabbing in a second, but there is something to be said for being able to play off one another as a broadcast team.
Yes.
And I think if you watch Mariners games today, you'll see that doesn't always exist. Like,
Sure.
I think a lot of the Mariners broadcasters are good individually, but the people they get partnered up with make them worse.
Sure.
They just make them worse.
I think that's possible. I'm a Dave Sims defender, so I will never accept. I love Dave
am
Sims.
too, but like if you ever hear him with Mike Blowers, I mean, there
Sure.
is noticeable friction between the two, and it, as a result, makes each of them worse at what they do.
Sure.
And that's just a thing that can happen. I don't think anyone's in the wrong there. You spend that
Sure.
much time with somebody, you're either going to love them or hate them. Calabro and Johnson they clearly liked each other. They
Yeah.
were good friends.
I remember being so sad when Marcus Johnson took a national job.
Yeah.
And but then I mean, you know, there were other guys that were good. I also thought David Locke was pretty good on the radio, by the way. I'm a big David Locke fan from back in the day. But let's talk about but now that we're done grabbing these announcers' balls, caressing these announcers' balls. Angie Menting, by the way, underrated in Seattle. Not grabbing her balls.
The difference I was going to say is that, like, look, man, you can be the tough, hard-nosed guy. You can be Rodman. You can be Draymond. But every man has a line. And once you start getting known for grabbing balls, because here's the thing. Reggie Evans, like, unless you're a Sonics fan, the thing you would remember Reggie Evans for is yanking Chris Kamen's private parts.
Sure.
Dillon Brooks is now the guy that the thing he's known for is being a heel and for hitting people in
And
the
a ball
nuts.
grabber.
And that's
No
one wants that guy on their team. Like, that's not something that, like, as a teammate you can even respect. You can respect Rodman, like, playing these mental and physical games with Karl Malone.
Sure.
And basically staying within the rules of basketball to get away with what he does. That's what he does. And
Sure.
same thing with, like, a guy like Draymond. Like, he does some dirty shit every now and then. Like, he might kick.
He hits some balls.
He hits
There's
some balls
being
but
hit.
usually he does it in such a subtle way, like, you know, kicking his leg out too far on a
Sure.
jumper. That you're like, it's almost cheeky. It's
Right.
almost cheeky.
Cheeky,
When you're
that's-
just punching a dude in the nuts, no one respects that. There has to be, like, a degree of difficulty involved that makes it so subtle. Like, it almost becomes like art.
Yeah.
And Brooks does not have that
Artful
element.
Sacktaps. That might be the name of the episode.
Brooks is he sucks.
Artless Sacktapper. Dillon Brooks.
Fuck you, Dillon Brooks.
So we'll just go through a couple. This is a very Seattle-focused episode. Robbie Ray's out for the season. I'm not like Robbie Ray. I was like not. Obviously, a lot was made of the Cy Young that he won the year before. Didn't have a great year last year.
He was actually pretty solid last year, but towards the end he really sucked, and obviously
Yeah, well,
known for the walk-off home run in the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. And also, like, by the way, like, I felt like, I don't know. So doesn't have the, like, dominating year. I think the other thing too is, like, this is the hazard of liking guys based on their accomplishments and not their actual performance. Like, the winning the Cy Young does not mean he's going to come in and be the best pitcher in baseball the next year or the best pitcher in the league next year.
Yeah.
If you look at his like the underlying metric stuff, it's a little more like those seasons look a lot more similar. But so he's out for the year. Starting pitching always available in at the deadline. It's like one of the, in my opinion, it's what you want to be attempting to acquire. And I want to say one thing about the Mariners specifically, because I think we're going to blow past this topic because there's a really cool topic to talk about before we get into our home run game. But the early season doom and gloom in baseball is like my least favorite thing about baseball. We are still today, we're 28 games into the season, and I have friends who on social media have been for weeks playing this fucking roller coaster. Like, the Mariners are so bad. They're terrible. By the way, these are almost exclusively people who also call them we. They call them, like, they are we.
Yeah.
But
I do the we thing
I don't
too.
like,
but
I don't like the we.
I don't do it all the time, and I'm very aware
Gotcha.
of what it all is.
But the like, it's a long season. They haven't been so horrible. They've had like some bad luck. They have this very obvious hole at DH. But again, if you just need to fill DH, that's a Mike Ford at AAA could come in and be a better. By the way, also the fact that Mike Ford's at AAA and could be a better DH, move the man up the bigs.
Yeah.
Like,
no, they've
they have a problem at DH.
all the things that they didn't address. This is their problem. You're right. They've had a lot of bad luck. Their best players are not playing well. They've had some injuries. Where last year they basically all their pitchers stayed healthy all year.
Yeah.
Which in their starting rotation.
Never happens 2 years in a row.
It never happens 2 years in a row. Right. So they've had some bad luck to start the year, but the point is all the things that they didn't address in the offseason that could have been fixed through free agency are becoming glaring problems. So when you combine those two things, when you combine the bad luck and the totally preventable things that they could have fixed in the offseason, it makes for a bad baseball team. If just one of those things is happening, if they're just having bad luck or they're having good luck and they just didn't patch those holes, then maybe you're hovering around 500 and you can make the late season run. I think the trend is that now things are maybe heading in the wrong direction where you would like to see them just kind of stay afloat for a while and then
you're getting like better contributions from Jared Kelenic. He's become something. Like I don't know what, I haven't actually spent a lot of time thinking about it, but like he's the most productive player on the team so far.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone thinks he's going to be. There used to be this joke among analytics guys, but it was basically like, there's stabilization rates and stats, right? Early on, you'll see guys that have super high strikeout rates, walk rates, hitting home runs at an inordinately high rate, high batting averages, and they would say the stats in the league are stabilized when Mike Trout leads the league and wins above replacement because he's always going to do that basically. That obviously this isn't the same anymore, but this was many years ago. And I kind of feel like you look at this team and you're like, well, if Julio Rodriguez is not leading position players and wins above replacement on this team, it's too early to make any judgments on anyone, including Jared Kelenic, who's playing well, and including Colton Wong, who I get messages from a friend of mine every fucking day because one of my cousins used to live in Hawaii, and when Colton Wong was a prospect, my cousin was friends with Kevin Towers, former.
I think you told this on the podcast.
Oh, did I already?
Yeah,
it's boring. Yeah. So
no,
my friend.
No, yeah.
Anyways, I don't know if it's because he just wants to fucking troll me that I like have a soft spot for Colton Wong or what, but Wong's been terrible.
He's been bad, but he's been getting better of late, I would say. Yeah, I mean the Mariners. Look, the accusation on the Mariners is that they're cheap in a lot of ways. I don't necessarily buy into that as much as most people, but it does look cheap when you fail to sign a second baseman and a designated hitter. When you have two starting positions on your team that you actively choose not to fill with guys who cost some money, you go bargain basement, which is what they did. That's bad. That looks bad to the fans, especially when you're a team that has real dreams of being in the World Series this season. When you choose not to spend the money in the offseason, it looks terrible. Where I think they do spend
Colton Wong,
money.
by the way, making $10 million in this year.
Yeah.
So it's not like, I mean, it's not, I'm quibbling with bargain basement is all I'm saying.
Yeah, he was. I mean,
I also have the keyboard, which is unfair because I'm fucking making my points and you don't have shit to make your points.
No, they could have, if you go out and sign one of the big shortstops or whatever, then your second baseman's J.P. Crawford, who's been your best hitter. So then all of a sudden you have another bat in the lineup that's actually producing along with J.P. Crawford, who's actually producing.
Yeah, I know they've liked Colton Wong for a long time. He's playing terribly. I'm not defending the signing, but yeah, I would say this the early season, like Stuart Little shit that people have bothers me so much.
Yeah, Mariner fans.
Chicken Little, not Stuart Little.
Stuart Little.
Chicken Little. Sky is falling.
Mouse
in
who
Chicken
drives
Little.
a race car sometimes.
That's right. That's right.
No, the Mariner. That's how Mariner fans are, man.
Yeah.
This is the group that I pander to the most.
Sure.
Is the miserable Mariner fan, because at times I feel like I'm one of them, but I'm also at times I feel omniscient, like I'm looking down even on myself.
Yeah.
Being immersed in like the misery that is Mariners fandom. So it's the easiest. It's the thing I know best, the thing I like making fun of the most. And you're right. I mean, at the end of April, start of May, there's no reason to worry about your baseball
Especially
team.
they're like 5 games out. They're not at the bottom. I mean, they're not like it's. Anyways,
It's the equivalent of playing like 2 NFL games. Like,
right.
if you know you have a bad NFL team and they go 0-2, you might think, okay, the season's over. But if you have like what everyone agreed was a pretty good NFL team and they lose their first 2 games, let's say they're both on the road, and they're 0-2 coming back home, you're like a little upset, but you're not like super, super concerned.
You do get to hear those things like 78,000 teams have gone 0-2 and 4 of them have made the playoffs. Something you get to hear that shit. But anyway, our Seattle Kraken. I'm on the bandwagon. Now, I actually didn't get to watch. I was driving from Helena to Bozeman when the
Great games. They were great games.
I watched I think 2 full games in the playoff series against Colorado. Actually, now that we're late enough in the podcast, I have my severance check. It was the curse of Casey that my former company was based in Colorado. I'm going to give, at Doug Scott's request, by the way, my thing that people I don't think know about being laid off that we talked about a couple weeks ago. You want to know what it is?
Yeah.
It's exciting, Alex. Non-disparagement agreements as part of severance agreements.
Yeah.
And non-disparagement means a lot of things. You think of non-disparagement, to me, sounds too much like they need to find a different word because it sounds too much like non-defamation.
Non-disclosure is very popular.
Non-disclosure.
Yeah.
Non-disparagement could mean anything like as little as me telling you privately that company sucks.
Yeah.
That would technically be breaking the non-disparagement agreement.
Did they know you did comedy? Is that why they're like, this guy has a real opportunity?
There were some people there that knew, not very many people did. I will say other people I know there got laid off and had the same non-disparagement agreement in their contract. But about 3 weeks before I got laid off, the National Labor Relations Board ruled that non-disparagement agreements as part of severance agreements are unlawful and unenforceable.
I do remember hearing this, yeah.
You can't slander. You still can't slander or defame. You have to be honest. But they can no longer enforce those. So I actually almost didn't sign, because that's like up to and including, let's say I go work for a competitor and I'm talking to some of the same people who I talk to and they go, well, why'd you leave? Or why did they go away?
Because I loved it so much.
Why should I pick your company over that company? And I would be very hamstrung by what I would have been able to say. Now, as long as I'm not slandering, which is illegal in all, like that remains illegal, but that's my hack for you. Fucking too many, like 170,000 tech employees have been laid off in the last 3 months or something like that. So disparage away within, be honest, whatever. But
so you can say it sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah, I'm not going to do it on this podcast. I'm just saying in your next line of work. I will.
Sure.
This podcast is not the place to be talking about that. What it is a place to be talking about is the first playoff series win in Seattle Kraken history. I didn't watch the game, but it was exciting. I was watching it like the game cast on my phone. It seemed like an exciting experience. The game that I did watch, game 1, I watched the full thing beginning to end, and it was like playoff hockey's the intensity is amazing.
Yeah, it's playoff hockey. There's nothing like it. I would just say hockey in general, especially at the NHL level, it's probably one of the easiest sports to just know nothing about it and immediately get sucked into it.
Sure.
If you're not a sports fan at all, or if you've never watched hockey, you can start watching the playoffs now, and it will be fun. It'll be fun, because the basic premise of the game makes sense to everybody. Just
get the puck in
the net. That's pretty much it. I mean, there's obviously a lot of nuance that goes on between that, but you can understand that much of it, which allows the game to be fun when you're watching it.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, they're great games to watch. I know hockey is not the biggest thing on the planet, but if you're immersed in the playoff series, it's cool to see your team win, especially when it's their first time. I mean, I don't think anyone was expecting them to win the series.
Sure.
And to have them come out, go 7 games, so you really feel like you're getting your money's worth then. You get all 7, and they go on the road and defeat Colorado in their home arena. That's pretty cool.
Also, loyal Poor Sports podcast listeners, you should know that part of the reason our podcast got preempted was because of the Seattle Kraken, because Alex was watching the game.
I was watching the game, and then it was like 8:45, and then I couldn't get my mic to work, which I had
Well, then there was another
built up
time
the
where we were
mic to
considering
you.
recording it, and then
I was like, nah.
yeah, you were like, maybe we could do it after the Kraken game, and then I think I was like, well, I'll text you, and then I didn't even text you. So
It's okay. We knew.
yeah, I knew the reality. So yeah, awesome, very fun.
Go Kraken.
Yeah, go Kraken. It's exciting. This is like the most Seattle heavy podcast we've done so far, but it's it's cool to see the city, like, you know, I'm a poser, by the way. I've like worn a Kraken hat for 50% of the days since they became a Seattle franchise.
Because their merch is great, man.
The logo's
Their
great.
merch
I still
is
stand
great.
by the name sucks, but whatever. I'll never. It doesn't matter. They're not gonna,
The logo on the hats, the merch, it's all very good. That S logo, even if they weren't the Kraken, could have applied. So.
Yes. Okay, let's play the home run game because I've started to realize that my wife is already texting me in the middle of this. So
I've got a guy for you that I don't know. This might be. I don't know if you remember this guy. This is an older guy, Mickey Tettleton. You remember him?
Ooh, Mickey Tettleton. Wow, yes, I do remember Mickey Tettleton. Can you give me the years that Mickey Tettleton
Yeah, this is why I said it was almost maybe a little unfair. This is probably where our 2-year age gap really comes into play because he stopped playing in '97.
Okay.
So like I vividly remember Mickey Tettleton, but you might have just been young enough where
Right.
it'd be tough to recall. But he was from '84 to '97, so 14 years in the bigs. A catcher primarily, but he also played some outfield, some first base. But the thing that I always remember about Mickey Tettleton, he had a lot of good years. When he was with Baltimore, him and Kyle Ripken would often just come up with the weirdest batting stances. You know, Ripken always changed his batting stance, and it was never normal looking.
Right.
And Tettleton started doing the same thing. And for the rest of his career, he would have just the wackiest batting stances, including one where he would just hold the bat like basically parallel to his belt buckle, right? Like it
Yeah.
would just be like flat out behind him in like the most unathletic position. And that's
wanna
how he
say
would start his
Jim
his-
Leyritz, I think, had a kind of similar, like a very horizontal bat.
Yeah, he would
that-
flatten out his bat.
yeah.
But the thing about Leyritz that I remember is that Leyritz would be he'd be in an athletic hitting position, right?
Sure.
Like he'd be crouched, his knees are bent. He looks like, even though the bat's doing its own weird thing, he's ready to attack a baseball. Tettleton would be like stock straight, standing up, not looking athletic at all, like a statue, and just kind of like holding the bat limp off to the side. And that's how he started his at-bats. But he was a pretty good hitter, and I remember being at games in the Kingdom, and like we'd get there early for batting practice, and this dude would just be launching balls into like the upper deck of the Kingdom. It was impressive to watch. Pretty good hitter. 14 years, like I said, he played for Oakland, he played for Baltimore, Detroit, and for Texas. And he was an all-star twice, in fact. Do you have any idea how many home runs he hit?
I don't. I mean, he plays in a time that is not the home run era, which is so back. He played in a time where like they'd be like, "That's like a 30 home run guy," and that was like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, that was like what you aspire to have." I knew he was around for a while. I'm actually a little surprised that he ended his career in '97. That seems earlier than I expected. 14 years. That the Baltimore, that puts him 97, means that his Baltimore years were probably not in Camden Yards also, or largely.
I'll tell
not.
you, they were not.
Yeah, so he doesn't get the modern bandbox stadium either.
But Texas is kind of a bandbox. Or
That's true.
That ballpark was.
That's true.
Doesn't exist
Was it
anymore.
was that the ballpark at Arlington? Is
Yeah.
that the one? Yeah. The pre-sponsored. I mean, I'm going to take a wild stab on this, and by the way, I want to point out Alex is clearly a socialist with this game in the recent weeks, where he's trying to give me a safety net. These low home run guys that I can't fuck it up, and I still try to fuck it up. I still try to get.
But then I came
to-
at you with this one today.
I know. and
Totally
this one,
reverse course.
This is a capitalist. I'm going 216.
That's pretty close, considering we preface this with you basically knowing nothing about him.
Yeah.
245.
I feel great about that. That's
That's
not bad
really
at all.
good. That's
That's
really
not bad
good.
at all. That's within 20%, which feels pretty good.
That was pretty solid. Yeah, his most that he ever hit in the season, he did it twice. 92 and 93 with Detroit, he hits 32 home runs. Actually, he did it again in 95 with Texas. He was a switch hitter, which anytime you were a power hitting switch hitter, that was always a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
But
I feel like one of the things about guys like that though is that they rarely hit well from both sides. It's like he is a switch hitter.
Yeah.
He's basically a shortstop when he hits from the right side, but when he hits from the left, but he can do it. Look how cool it is to watch.
It felt like there were so many switch hitters in the 90s. Like that's one of those things that's seemingly gone away in the modern game. Like there are still switch hitters, but not with the propensity that there were in the 90s. In the 90s, everybody had a switch hitter.
It's incredibly rare that guy's actually good from both sides.
Yeah,
it's like a parlor trick. You know what I mean?
They were always good from like the left side and then basically handicapped from the right.
Here's a realization I've had as I grow and I see like kind of the things that guys are able to do. And another thing I've been doing is watching a lot of like YouTube golf. And you see these guys who are like pretty good athletes, and they'll be like, do a left-handed golf challenge, and you're like, oh, that guy's left-handed swing is like as good as my right-handed swing.
Yeah.
And he's right-handed. And what I've realized is that though baseball players are like nominally right or left-handed, I think most pro athletes, this is my sneaking suspicion, is that almost all pro athletes are very close to ambidextrous or would be considered ambidextrous in like a high school setting.
I think, especially with baseball, you know, when I was growing up, me and my brother would play wiffle ball in the yard, and we would both bat and throw from both hands.
Gotcha.
Because we would emulate our favorite players.
Right.
So, like, when we were emulating a lefty, we were throwing lefty.
Yeah.
And when we were, same at the dish. Like, if it was a Ken Griffey Jr., I'm batting left-handed now. And you just... That's like, if you're naturally athletic, like I look at this clearly.
Yes.
But as a kid, I very much was. And it just comes naturally. Like
So,
you just know how to do it.
You're shitting all over my childhood then, because I'm one of the least ambidextrous people. I'm actually very like hand-eye coordination's fine with my left hand. Throw bad with my left hand. Swing bad with left-handed. Yeah, but I never spent any time doing it. And I'll even say like, you know, dribbling a basketball. Again, it's like you just play sports growing up. People would be surprised to see how coordinated I am dribbling a basketball, right? Based on if you never knew me at all and you were just like, look at Casey, is he good or not good at dribbling a basketball? Pretty decent. However, I'm now thinking about this, and I never got good at dribbling with my left hand. And I bet you I could cross over on all that stuff, but I bet you the ball never spent more than one dribble on my left side.
Yeah,
is my guess. So. I'm a piece of shit. You're great. Whatever.
We're just going to take you out one day and film you play a basketball. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. My guy is a former Mariner, a guy who we've talked about this kind of nostalgic, holy shit, I can't remember that guy played for the Mariners guy. Mark Whitten.
Oh, yeah.
Hard hitting.
Yeah, bad hitting or hard hitting.
Hard hitting, Mark Whitten.
He only played in 96, I believe, for the Mariners.
Played for the Mariners in 96.
He's also one of those guys that had 4 home runs in a game. Not for the Mariners. I think he was with the Cardinals when it happened.
Yes. A guy who, another switch hitter, by the way.
Yeah. I don't ever remember him batting righty.
Me either.
But I do, now that you mention it, I do remember him being a switch hitter.
I'm going to pull up the splits and see. By the way, 14 career wins above replacement, which is more than I would have expected. He
was a decent player. Like, I don't think he was serviceable. If he was like your 4th outfielder or part-time DH, you were fine.
Yeah, and my memory is that he was like an above average defensive outfielder, because though he was hard hitting, he was not like a thick man. I remember him being pretty thin and
he had like
athletic.
He had kind of like a crouch stance. He kind of like everything that he didn't scream power hitter, but he hit with power. Yeah.
I'm going to pull up just to validate what we were talking about, his platoon splits for 96 with the Mariners, hopefully.
Yeah, Whitten was now he would be, there's a lot of Mark Whittens bump like all across the league now.
Sure.
But back then he was like a platoon guy before platoons were popular. How many years did he play?
He played 11 years.
Yeah, and most of those, I would have to imagine almost all 11 were as a part-time player. There might have been like 1 or 2 seasons where he started full-time, and he was never like, I mean, he probably averaged 12 home runs a season over the 11 seasons. So I'll give you a number without any more information. I'm going to say 125 home runs.
Come on now. Let me say, the mobile page for 125 is not a bad guess. Okay. It's 105. So closer by percentage than me.
Yeah, I went a little too high based on his The hard hitting threw me.
I know. I was trying. The hard hitting added 10 to the. Yeah. So a guy 259, 341, 415. A guy who walked much more than you expect for the time. I was trying to get his platoon. Well, we can do it on the computer.
His numbers now are very respectable for today's game, but his numbers in the 90s were very much not respectable.
Right.
I mean, in the 90s, if you weren't hitting at least 280, people thought you sucked.
Yeah.
And yet, you're right. I mean, he was getting on base with walks, and then, he hit the ball hard.
So he had a 20% strikeout rate, 20% strikeout rate, 10% walk rate. That's a guy who in today's baseball would be like beloved.
He only had one season with negative WAR.
Yeah, 13 wins above replacement for a guy who played, who had like 5 seasons worth of plate appearances.
It's really funny because in '93, which I think is the year that he hits 4 dingers in a game, he has 25 home runs and like arguably one of his better offensive seasons, probably one of his best offensive seasons. But his defensive WAR that year is negative 13.7. What the hell happened? I guess he was playing for an NL team, so every time he's playing back then, he's in the field.
Yeah.
He can't be hidden with the DH position like when he gets to the AL.
Yeah, some of that, of course, is like positional value. So first basemen have negative positional value most often.
Yeah, prior to that, so he'd been with Toronto and then with Cleveland. So he'd only been in the AL. They don't really know what he is as a fielder. He's probably DHing a lot. He comes over to the NL in '93. They have to put him out in the field, and it's a complete abomination, clearly.
Yeah. Let's see. So I want to get his splits for '96, and then we'll get out of here because I just want to validate that thing. If like one, how much of a platoon guy he was, and then how much of that when he played with I think I might be. This might be terrible. This new Fangraphs.
I went into the bowels of Fangraphs.
Yeah, I think I've lost too much familiarity with Fangraphs to be able to do this quickly. Well, listen, folks, we'll come back with that information next week. I know you're worried about it. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Thank you, Lainey, for being in studio. Our first in-studio guest, my dog. She was also now our second in-studio. She was in for half of one of them a while back.
She bailed on that one.
Yep.
She stayed till the end for this one.
All right. Talk to you all next week.